Greetings. I just have a couple of opening comments, and then I'll take your questions. The Parliamentary Budget Office released a report today that outlines what we've known for a long time, but really in a lot of clarity, how inequality is growing, how wealth is being concentrated into fewer and fewer hands, and that the wealthiest Canadians are gaining more and more wealth, and the rest of Canadians have less and less opportunities and resources. That's something that we know is only getting worse with the pandemic. The pandemic hit people in different ways. Those who are working class, those who are middle class, for those who are low income, were harder hit than those at the very top. And this inequality is only going to grow, which really highlights how it makes no sense that Mr. Trudeau continues to refuse to make the super rich pay their fair share. Why it makes no sense that he allows or he supports the government's clawbacks of GIS and child benefit from vulnerable Canadians, yet does nothing to tackle the wealthiest corporations that took public money and exploited the system and abused the system. It makes no sense because we're seeing the evidence inequality is only growing. So again, we're going to call on this government to make sure that the super rich pay their fair share and invest that back into measures that make life more affordable, given how the inflation is driving up the cost of living. Donc, le rapport lancé par le bureau du directeur du budget montre clairement que les inégalités accroissent. C'est quelque chose qu'on a déjà vu et c'est fort probable que la pandémie a empiré la situation. Donc, c'est pourquoi encore on souligne l'importance d'avoir une taxation juste, que les autres riches paient le juste part pour investir dans les mesures pour rendre la vie plus abordable pour les gens. Donc, on va continuer de mettre la pression sur M. Trudeau et encore questionner M. Trudeau pourquoi il continue de défendre les intérêts des autres riches quand les inégalités continuent d'accroître. Avec ça, I'm ready with any questions you might have.
Mr. Singh, on a topic unrelated to what you just talked about, I apologize for that,
no
but a grade 3 teacher in Chelsea, Quebec was removed from the classroom because she wears a hijab and is not allowed to teach under Quebec's Bill 21. I wonder if we can get your reaction to this incident and also how you feel about it personally.
This is exactly why I've been opposed to this bill from the beginning, why I continue to be opposed to it. This is a teacher who there were no concerns about her capacity and ability to teach, no concerns about whether she's providing good education to kids. Simply because of the way she looked and the way she dressed, she is no longer able to teach those kids. That is everything that's wrong with this bill. That highlights it. And on a personal note, I know what that's like to feel like you don't belong because of the way you look and to not be able to do what you love because of the way you look. That's what's happened right now and why this bill is so wrong.
Is it time for the federal government to challenge this in court?
Well, the bill is being challenged in court, and that's
for Mr. Trudeau.
And it's the right thing for it to be challenged in court. It's important that laws that are unjust in provinces are challenged in those provinces. It sends a message clearly that the people of Quebec don't all support this bill and see a problem with it. And the fact that it's being challenged in court is the right thing, and it's going to continue.
Mr. Singh, the Conservatives rejected yesterday a proposal on the Winnipeg Lab documents. I'm wondering if your party has any view on that proposal. It was structured similar to the Afghan detainee issue from 2010. The Liberals were offering, the Conservatives rejected it. Mr. Holland says he is prepared to potentially go ahead just with yourselves and the Bloc if you can find an agreement.
Our principles here when it comes to the document release is that we want transparency, and we want to be able to bring that to Canadians as well. If there's sensitive information, that information can be limited, but the general principle here is Canadians want to know what happened, what's going on, and we want to make sure that this government is being held to account and being transparent about decisions made, about details about what's going on. And there have been ongoing concerns that have been raised about questions about involvement of other countries and questions about the impact on our security as Canadians. So these are things that Canadians want to have answers to, and we want to support a process that gets us to a point where we can disclose that to Canadians as well.
Does the Liberals proposal do that?
That's what we're still working on assessing. Is it going to be enough for us to provide that transparency that Canadians deserve. The reason why I'm concerned is it's very different when there were concerns raised around military and sensitive information around military forces. And I understand, given an ongoing conflict or an ongoing action in Afghanistan, that that's a different criteria or a different level. We're not in that same circumstance, so that same approach, on the face of it, doesn't seem to make sense. But we want to make sure that those values are met, or those standards are met. We can have transparency, Canadians can know the details, and that's what we're working towards.
Mr. Freeland was testifying on C2 with the Finance Committee a few minutes ago. She was asked by your party about GIS callbacks for seniors who also serve. She said she knows it's a problem and that they are working on something to address it. She didn't go into any details. Do you need some sort of detailed plan to address that problem to support C2? Is there a scenario in which you support C2?
We've said from the beginning that C2 cuts benefits to people without any alternative in place. And so given the Omicron variant, given the rising numbers, we know that there is a real likelihood that Canadians will continue to feel the pressures in the impacts of the pandemic. Our goal has always been, let's make sure people get help. And we're not through this pandemic yet. The Liberals are proposing to cut help to people while we still need to get people that support. And so that's why we're opposed to the bill. But in addition, we've said two alternatives. One is if the employment insurance was changed and reformed so that 60% of Canadians who aren't covered right now were covered, we would be open to ending pandemic benefits and replace them with a reformed EI that actually works for all Canadians. That was one option. But no matter what happens with the government's approach to pandemic benefits, we are adamant that they need to immediately stop the clawbacks. This is not a thing that the government can wait and say it's going to take weeks to solve. We've got families right now, seniors right now, that are desperately calling our offices, letting us know that they cannot pay their bills. They can't pay rent. There's no reason why a senior on GIS, a vulnerable senior who doesn't have enough resources to get by, should have their back because they needed help in the pandemic. There is no justification for that. There's no reason why a family that receives child benefit normally is having that child benefit clawed back because they needed extra help in the pandemic. And there's no excuse for the delay to fix this problem. Stop the clawbacks and immediately reimburse families the entire amount that they are owed. En français, on se question? OK. Donc, depuis le début, on a dit qu'on est, on est contre ces deux parce que ces deux coupent l'aide aux gens dans une pandémie. On est toujours dans une pandémie. On a une variant Omicron qui menace la population. Et c'est clair que ça peut avoir plus des impacts sur les gens. Donc, on veut que les appuis aux gens continuent. Une alternative, c'est d'avoir une réforme de l'assurance-emploi. Parce qu'à ce moment, l'assurance-emploi ne couvre pas 60% des Canadiens et Canadiennes. Donc, si on a une réforme de l'assurance-emploi, ça, c'est une alternative. On peut appuyer quelque chose comme ça. Mais sans avoir une alternative, on est contre la coupure de l'aide aux gens dans une pandémie. Et finalement, malgré tout ce que le gouvernement fait avec les aides aux gens, on est fortement contre les coupures de l'aide pour les aînés vulnérables et pour les familles. Et ces coupures doivent être arrêtées tout de suite et les familles et les aînés doivent être remboursés l'argent qu'ils ont besoin d'avoir parce qu'on a eu tellement des appels des gens qui sont dans une situation précaire, ils sont en péril de perdre leur maison, de ne pas rejoindre les deux bouts. Donc, on doit les aider tout de suite. On n'accepte pas les excuses du gouvernement. On doit régler ce problème immédiatement.
Donc, M. Singh, en deux mots, aucune voie d'appui du NPD pour C2. Il n'y a aucune manière que le NPD appuie C2?
À ce moment, non, pas du tout, parce qu'ils vont couper l'aide aux gens sans avoir une alternative. Et on encore répète qu'on doit aussi régler les coupures de l'aide aux aînés vulnérables et aux familles qui en ont besoin.
Très rapidement, dans le rapport du VG, le fédéral ne surveille pas assez les quarantaines et ils n'ont pas surveillé les conditions de travail des travailleurs temporaires étrangers. Vous en pensez quoi?
Est-ce que vous pouvez répéter la question?
Oui, apparemment, vérificatrice générale a
Oui.
noté que le fédéral n'avait pas surveillé les conditions de quarantaine et le logement des travailleurs étrangers temporaires qui étaient vulnérables.
C'est une critique qu'on a vue depuis longtemps. C'était une critique qui continue. Et c'est une critique qui montre que ce gouvernement était une faillite avec les protections nécessaires, en particulier avec nos frontières. C'était une critique depuis le début de cette pandémie. Plusieurs enjeux étaient soulevés. Comment le gouvernement n'a pas répondu avec un système de quarantaine qui fonctionne, avec des règlements cohérents, et c'est continue d'être une critique. Et la vérificatrice a montré comment c'est vraiment un problème. Merci. Merci beaucoup. Thank you. Thanks.